Today's edition of Your Humanities Half Hour contains references to mature topics that may not be appropriate for young listeners. Parental discretion is advised.
Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Holidays and Tenorio, welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Harris. Well, as many of you may have read in the papers or heard otherwise, April was Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and we wanted to spend some time talking about this sensitive but important topic. It's our pleasure to have on the show today the Executive Director of the Northern Marianas Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, Maise B. Tenorio. Maise, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for making time for us today. You woke up, and I understand you were feeling a little under the weather, but we've been trying to do this for a while, and you're so faithful to pull through, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I apologize if my voice isn't the best today.
Well, it's better than not having you here and not hearing from you at all, so
thank you.
Thank you. Talk to us a little bit about the coalition. It's a really long name, and I understand you guys have a lot of responsibilities. What is the role of the coalition?
Sure. Well, thank you again. So the coalition, the Northern Marianas Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, is a community-based nonprofit. That means we're not a government agency, and we work for our community. Our mission is to promote, nourish, and sustain a collective movement against violence here in the CNMI. So our work is on Saipan, Tinian, and Rhoda. We work throughout the CNMI to really help create a community that's violence-free, where everyone feels respected and safe, and that everyone can be a part of it. I mean, a part of our mission statement is the fact that we are a collective movement. So our role is to really nourish that, to encourage everyone, from children to adults to the manamko, to take a role, to take part in our movement to create a violence-free CNMI.
Now, you've been with the coalition for a number of years now. What is it that speaks to your heart that makes you so dedicated to the cause?
Well, everybody comes to this work for their own personal reasons, and it's really hard work. But we're all very passionate about it. I lost a very dear aunt to domestic violence when I was very young. So I grew up understanding what the risks are, when we're not engaged, when we're not, paying attention and reaching out, and we're not educated. Because back then in the 80s, no one talked about domestic violence. We didn't understand what it was all about. We just kind of felt like that's just what the way things are, and that's a family matter, or that's a matter for the husband and wife to deal with. But now we understand and know that it's really critical for family members to get involved. And so my passion has always been around advocacy and helping people get through hard times. And so I started working with survivors of domestic violence, and also started learning about sexual assault, and realizing that there are so many people in our community who are living with sexual assault, who are experiencing it, but there really wasn't a movement out there that really was their voice. Many survivors have come up to me over the years, survivors of sexual assault, and said, I experienced sexual assault as a young child or as an adult, and I've never told anyone. And now that the coalition is here, I feel like it's my voice, and you guys are speaking for me and for all the other survivors who have never had the opportunity or felt empowered enough to speak out for themselves. So the coalition, again, it's for our community. It's a voice for survivors out there, because many, if you know anybody who's living with violence or abuse, or if you yourself have been a victim of violence or abuse, you understand that it's a very lonely experience. Many survivors feel silenced. They feel shamed. They live in fear. And it's very challenging, very hard for them to speak out. So the coalition tries to be their voice, tries to speak out and encourage folks to understand where they're coming from.
Do you think you could give us a definition or some examples of what is domestic violence, what is sexual violence? Because I think people may not realize that they're actually victims when they are.
Right, that's very true. A lot of people, that's the first step, is really understanding what these things are. We use the big terms like domestic violence and sexual assault, but oftentimes people who are experiencing it, they may not call it that. Domestic violence is when one person in an intimate relationship, either husband and wife, or even in a same gender relationship, or boyfriend and girlfriend, where one person uses power and control, uses coercive behavior or abusive behavior to control the other person. And so some examples of this abusive behavior could be physical assault, it could be sexual assault, it could be monitoring and controlling the other person. We hear a lot about excessive or obsessive jealousy here in the CNMI. That's a common thread that we've seen a lot of unhealthy relationships. So the perpetrator uses, or the person who's causing the harm uses abusive behavior in order to control their intimate partner or their spouse. And that's what we would consider domestic violence. And one of the key things to realize too is that a relationship where there's domestic violence, it happens like in cycles or patterns. It's rarely just a one-time incident, and often happens a lot over time. So, for example, an abusive incident might happen, or the partner might use some abusive behavior, and then they'll try to make up. They'll apologize for the behavior, or they'll say, I'm sorry, or they'll try to make up somehow or promise never to do it again. And then there's kind of like what we call the honeymoon period of the relationship, where everything seems wonderful and nice. And then anxiety starts to build up, tension starts to build up, and then the cycle happens all over again. Many victims of domestic violence, even those that have spoken out recently and with the coalition, many of them have said that in the beginning, the relationship was wonderful. It was great. Victims say, I thought I found the one person who understood and loved me. So they're always trying to get back to that. They always feel like they can get back to that happy place, but the violence just keeps on happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How about sexual assault? Some people may not be aware what it entails sexual assault.
Sure. The coalition's definition of sexual assault is any behavior or any sexual contact or sexual behavior between two people where one person doesn't give consent or doesn't agree to the behavior or to the act or to the contact.
So is it only physical contact, and it doesn't even have to be very intimate? It could be just touching, or
exactly.
What about verbal?
Yeah, sexual assault, thank you for bringing that up. Sexual assault can be physical, verbal, or visual. So the physical types of sexual assault are obvious, like you said, touching, grabbing. Rape is the more extreme version of it, but there are many forms in between where somebody is physically assaulting the other person in an intimate way. Verbal is really more known in terms of sexual harassment, using inappropriate language, telling inappropriate jokes, offending other people, those kinds of things. Visual sexual assault is, especially now with access to technology, a lot of people are experiencing this, and this is happening a lot with our young people too, where people send inappropriate text messages or inappropriate images or photos through email or through the phone or through social media applications like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. So those things can be considered sexual assault or sexual harassment if the one person didn't consent to receiving those inappropriate images or obscene images. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier that it's hard work. And I can imagine that not only are you putting in the time, but there's also maybe some emotion involved. First of all, tell us about your staff.
Sure,
and
I'd
then
love
tell
to.
us about the kind of work that you guys do.
So I have the pleasure and the honor of working with three other incredible people, Kiki Igato Benjamin, Angel Nimwes Palacios, and Shane Mendiola, all work at the office, and they do various things. The coalition does a lot of work from training and technical assistance. We work directly with people at the Department of Public Safety, Office of the Attorney General, CARIDOT, many of the service providers out there keeping our community safe and serving victims and survivors directly. To the folks at the Northern Marianas College who are creating a new system and policy for their campus to keep their students and faculty safe. So we're helping them write policy. We work with PSS and the private school system in terms of education and prevention and outreach. So our work is pretty wide, and we do this throughout the CNMI, Saipan, Tinian, and Rhoda. So it takes a lot of, I guess, energy to put out all this work. But like I said, all of us who do this work are very passionate, and we love the work that we do. We are also led and guided by a board of directors. Our chairperson is Mrs. Lali Ariola and 6 other volunteers. So we have a volunteer board who take their time to help us, guide us, inspire us, and support all the work that we do. They also help raise money for the coalition.
And speaking of which, what are your funding sources?
The coalition is funded mainly through federal grants. We get grants through the Office on Violence Against Women and the Department of Health and Human Services, specifically the Family Violence and Prevention Services Bureau. So those are our main sources of funding, but we definitely rely on community donations, other community foundations and grants. Most recently, a couple years ago, PIC made a large donation to us through their Half-a-Day 5K. So there's so many businesses out there who are willing to help out. I know, for example, Hyatt just did this amazing reach to the community to support the different efforts that are out there. But yeah, our main funding is through federal grants.
Well, we're speaking today with Maise B. Tenorio, the Executive Director of the Northern Marianas Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, and we'll be back with more after this break.
Hafa Day, this is Eulalia Villagomez of the Northern Marianas Humanities Council. Did you know that you can donate up to $5,000 to the Humanities Council through the CNMI Education Tax Credit Program? Donations from individuals and corporations qualify and can be used to offset your local wage and salary tax, BGRT, and earnings tax. Call our office at 235-4785 to see how you can support humanities programs in our community and obtain a tax credit for your donation. Thank you, and Cesar Masi.
Welcome back to Your Humanities Half Hour. We're speaking today with the Executive Director of the Northern Marianas Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, Maise B. Tenorio. Maise, how prevalent is this problem of domestic and sexual violence here in the Northern Marianas?
We get asked that question a lot, and the truth is we don't have prevalence data for the CNMI. That means we don't really know the rate of what's happening. We know nationally and globally it's a very serious problem. 1 in 4 girls, for instance, are at risk for experiencing sexual assault in her lifetime. That's a huge number. But we do have a large number of cases being reported. The only, I guess, setback with using those numbers is that it talks about the reporting rate. Like, it tells you how many people are reaching out and getting help, but it doesn't really give us a sense of how much is actually happening in our community. Now, that said, we know that anecdotally and based on, even for a small community, the number of reports that we're getting, it's pretty high. We spend quite a lot of time talking with our community through listening sessions and presentations and being out there in the schools. And we know that people are experiencing sexual assault and domestic violence regularly and daily here in the CNMI. Quite a few number of people that we know and care for in our families or in our neighborhoods are living with violence and abuse. And the truth is, for a community like ours that believes in unity and family, one person living with violence and abuse is one too many. But we know we have a lot more than one. We have children living with violence and abuse, infants living with violence and abuse. And that's just not okay. We know at the coalition, deep in our heart that this is not the community that we want. This community believes in the values of love and respect and protection. Those are the values that we grow up with. And it may feel like we're fighting a losing battle, but we've been saying for many years that we have all the tools that we need to fix this problem. We have, the value of respect. And if we really kind of go back to that and start honoring and valuing everyone's humanity, every single person in your family, in your community, in your neighborhood, in your school, in your place of worship, start valuing everyone's humanity, and we wouldn't be hurting each other, right? So it's simple. We talk about a collective movement, and we want to focus on that because it really takes all of us. As hard as DPS works, as hard as Caradot works, as hard as the hospital works to serve our community, we need to be part of the solution as well. The real work to end domestic violence and sexual assault is with our community. It's with you. It's with the people who are listening. So
give us some practical tips.
Sure.
Then, like for parents, for example.
Sure. Parenting is hard.
No.
Right? You're a parent, I'm a parent, and, so many parents are out there. So that in just, providing shelter and food and education is a task in and of itself. I get it. But, part of our role as parents is to keep our kids safe. Right? And I feel like that's one of those paramount things that we need to focus on is keeping our kids safe. And one of the ways that we can do that is by talking to our kids about these issues. Again, incredibly hard. I've had to have this conversation myself, and it wasn't easy. But there are ways that you can do it. Because as hard as it is for us as adults to have this conversation, it's much harder for our children to have questions in their mind and not be able to get answers for them, to have bad things happen to them and have no one to turn to. So if you kind of measure, right, the difficulty, I think it's a small sacrifice for us as parents to make, is that little bit of uncomfortable feeling to ensure that our kids are safe. So one practical thing that parents can do is to take opportunities to talk to our kids about our bodies, right? Understanding sexual assault first starts with understanding your body, what your body is meant for.
So what would you say to a child? Like, say, what age would you start having this conversation, and what would you say to them at different ages if the message changes?
Sure. I really empower parents to go with their gut, because parents know their kids the best. I really believe that. So I don't know that there's really an age. For example, for me, it was about 7 from my older daughter and about 8 from my younger one, just because I felt like there was a difference in their maturity. We really, really young kids, like for example, 2, 3, and 4, they might start asking about their body parts, and you can simply say what they're for. Your arms are for this, for touching, for feeding yourself, your legs are for this. I think the rule of thumb for really, really young kids, especially if they're asking questions, is to answer them very directly and very simply.
Yes, because they may not actually want the whole story. They may just want enough of the story to satisfy them at their age of development.
So, for example, my little one was about 3 when she first asked me where the babies come from. And as panicked as I was at that point, I went to my kind of, I grew up Catholic. So I went there and said, Mommy and Daddy prayed really hard for a baby, and then God blessed us when He felt we were ready with the baby in my tummy, and I grew the baby, and that's what happened.
She was satisfied,
and she was satisfied with that. As she grew and the questions became more complicated, I just added to it, because because in my family, that's what really we believe, right? That prayer is important in all aspects of our life. Not everybody might feel that way, and that's okay. So we just kind of added to the story as time went on, right? So prayer was part of it, but mommy and daddy had to do other things also in order to get pregnant. So those questions started coming, and I started answering them. One day she asked about more specifically, because she knows that there are single parents out there, right? So how did the single moms get pregnant? So I had to really, dig deep, and at that moment really seize the opportunity to talk to her very specifically about that issue. And luckily for me, I had those opportunities. My kids felt comfortable enough to ask me questions. Now, not all parents have that experience, and that's okay. Recently, this mom talked to me about a coloring book that DYS gives out, and her daughter is 4. So she went through the coloring book with her daughter, and that gave her the opportunity to talk to her daughter about good touches and bad touches, what's comfortable, what's uncomfortable, what's safe and unsafe. And so it really opened the door for her. So she created her own opportunity to talk. Other parents use books. There's this book series called All About My Body that some parents have turned to. You can order online. So some parents create different opportunities to talk to their young kids about it. Now, by the time they're middle school and high school, you might want to start really thinking about, if you haven't had the opportunity to talk, to really create a space. Because at the Coalition, we feel every single time you have the conversation, you're building a bridge for your child. We really want parents to visualize this, that every single time you answer your child's question, or you seize a teaching moment, or you let them know that they deserve to be respected and safe, that you're building a bridge for them. So that if something bad, gosh forbid, ever happens to them, they have a place to run to, right? They have mom and dad. We talk to a lot of kids. And amazingly, they always tell us, we get it. We understand what violence and abuse is. Can you talk to our parents about it? And it always kind of I have to take a moment to pause, as a parent also, and think, wow, okay, where are we falling short as parents, mm-hmm. right? And even in 2017, a lot of teenagers are saying parents are not talking to them about these things, and they have to go online to find information and go to their friends to find information. And as great as the internet is, a lot of that information is not accurate. Mm-hmm. Another thing that you can do is, if you're still uncomfortable having this conversation, I know that the HIV and STI clinic, they're more than happy to help provide education. Clinics and doctors are more than happy to provide education. Make an appointment for your child and take them there, and ask the provider, doctor, nurse practitioner, to talk to your child about whatever it is you think is kind of missing, in their toolbox, right? Because we always also say these things are tools. We got to fill up our kids' toolboxes, and having an accurate and good understanding about their bodies and what their bodies are meant for, and how other people need to respect boundaries and, not touch them if they don't want to be touched. Those are all tools that our kids need to have in their toolbox. So if somebody tries to violate them or invade their space or touch them without their consent, hey,
or
they
can
send
them emails and pictures
exactly.
that they are not comfortable with.
Yeah, they will know right away, hey, this is not okay. Reach in their toolbox and figure out, how do I deal with this situation? I remember when mom said, call this number. Or I remember when dad said, you can talk to me about anything. And they have a place to go, mm-hmm. right? And so I think that's the really critical thing for parents, is to really build that bridge, make that toolbox so our kids have somewhere to go. And to me, that's keeping our kids safe. The more information they have from people who love them, the more prepared they are, and the more safe they can keep themselves.
Let's talk for a moment to the victim. It could be an adult, it could be a young person who now realizes or has known that they are a victim, that somebody is doing something to them that is not right, and they just want the person to stop, but they may not necessarily want that person to get in trouble.
Sure.
If they tell somebody what's going on.
And thank you for bringing that up, because that happens a lot, especially with children. Most children are harmed by somebody that they know, trust, and possibly even love, like someone in their family. So that the last thing they want is to get that person in trouble. There are some resources online that kids can reach out to, but we will caution and say that some people are mandatory reporters, right?
They have to report.
They have to report.
Suspect.
So teachers, doctors, nurses, anyone in a helping profession, if they hear that a child is being harmed, they're mandated by law to report that. And oftentimes, even though it's difficult, to me, that might be the best case. Because if somebody is harming a child, the likelihood of them harming other children is there. And it's pretty high in my opinion. So reporting to somebody not only protects a child who's being currently harmed, but it could protect other children in the future who may potentially be harmed by the same offender.
And how about adults? They've been a victim and they want help, but they don't necessarily want that person to go to jail.
Yeah.
What do you
There are
say
more
to them?
options for adults in terms of not reporting. So the CARADOT has a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotline. And the number is 234-5100. So you can call at any time during the day or night for help and to talk to somebody and for resources. The Community Guidance Center also offers counseling, or they can refer you. Some people have the benefit of insurance, so they may refer you to other private providers, or they may provide you services for free at the Community Guidance Center. The number is 323-6560, and you just call and make an appointment. There's so many people out there who are ready and willing to help, and we know that reporting can be very delayed. And like you said, some people just don't want to report. They just want to figure out how to get over it. And that's okay too. We want to respect the rights of survivors to heal and find justice in any way that feels right for them.
We talked a lot today about the role parents can play in helping to prevent and stop violence. But mention, if you would, because I know you attack this on several fronts, employers, clergymen, coaches, everybody needs to be a part of this.
Yes, exactly. So our theme for Sexual Assault Awareness Month this year was engaging all voices. And, we really wanted to speak to everyone out there and encourage them to be part of the movement. Everybody has a role, like you said. So, for example, coaches, their sports is such a big thing here. And so coaches have this unique opportunity to create environments in their team on the field where safety and respect is paramount, right? Coaches have incredible influence over their team, be it Little League or volleyball, soccer, whatever they're coaching, they have incredible influence over the members of their team. So it's up to them to create this kind of environment. And they can say, violence is not tolerated on this team, on the field. Respect is number one. Respect each other. Respect me, respect yourselves. And they can set the tone, right, for respect and safety wherever they're at. And that's the same for example, clergy, faith leaders. We also had a day of prayer during Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And many of our faith leaders said, that it's, part of their job to make sure that in the congregation, everybody understands that violence and abuse is not okay. And it's not okay to use the Bible, to hurt and abuse other people. And that in our place of worship, love is a top, the top value and respect. And so everyone's expected to behave in that way, right? So it's pretty amazing that everybody has a sphere of influence. So take a minute to think about who you are influencing in your life. And use that influence to create spaces where, love, respect, and safety are the top values in that space.
Wow, take a minute.
Yeah.
That's something that we can all reflect on. I want to give you opportunity for any final thoughts before we go.
This year is the coalition's 10th anniversary. We started the coalition back in 2005, but officially incorporated on March 21st, 2007. It's been an amazing decade of creating peace and safety and love in our community. And every year we are pretty blown away at the capacity of the people out there to really do what it takes to create a violence-free CNMI. And more so, we are always empowered by the courage and bravery of survivors and victims. There's so many out there who are speaking out, who are helping others, who are just encouraging and inspiring us. It takes tremendous courage to live with violence and abuse, and to figure out ways to make yourself and your family safe. And so I don't think survivors and victims, get enough credit for that. Oftentimes people think, people question their decision making, but we know that they're surviving day in and day out, and that takes incredible courage. So we are so lucky to have such an amazing community to work in. And we just thank everyone, for being part of our movement to end domestic violence and sexual assault in our community. We couldn't have done it without you. And we hope that everyone will stick with us for the next 10 years.
Well, thank you so much, Maise.
Thank you for having me. The coalition can be reached at 234-3878. We'd love to hear from you. We're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So many ways to get a hold of us. Again, if there's something that you feel like we should be doing, or different ways that we can talk about, domestic violence or sexual assault, or just if you have suggestions or thoughts, please reach out to us. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Our number is 234-3878.
We've been speaking today with the Northern Marianas Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. Please contact them if you need help or you would like to help. This has been Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Harris.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.